How did you get your start in photography?
It was a hobby that I took up because I had so much time available to me when I was drafted in the American Army. As luck would have it, I was trained for Vietnam, but was subsequently sent to Germany instead. 51 men in my platoon went off to Vietnam, and I wound up having my orders changed to go to Germany for no reason whatsoever. It was a bit of a surprise to me, my friends, my colleagues, and my family. So when I got there, they asked for a show of hands, how many can type? And I raised my hand up, assuming that other people also could type. I was the only one that left my hands up at 35 words per minute. and got the job as a clerk typist for the commandant of the 3rd Armored Division. This placed me in a rather formidable role. I was like radar in MASH, and I was responsible for pretty much the wheres and wherefores of this particular command. And when the general left and when the colonel left, I could leave. So I found myself with a lot of free time because the general and the colonel were forever leaving their offices. And I found myself wandering around in a daze, found this place called Special Services that contained a facility called a darkroom. And I just got started I was enthralled. I still am. I have to mention the process of looking in the darkroom. I thought it was a religious ceremony with people kind of genuflecting and bowing and turning and putting things in water. And it was very, very, shall we say, mesmerizing. So I thought I'd have a go with that. I picked up a camera, started taking pictures, won a photo contest, in which the prize was a $50 savings bond, and that was it, pretty much, save for the fact that it was published in our local newspaper in Germany. And the commanding general, who knew of me, of course, because I worked with him, asked me to photograph him and his family. and that was my start. I took pictures of him and his family, and I learned then and there the power of a photographer. The fact that I could stand in front of, there were 3 generals and 5 full-bird colonels, that was his family, and their respective wives, and that I could actually stand before them as a private and tell them what to do was to me just the most powerful. I found myself with this, not recipe for control, but it was that responsibility was heaped on me. And now I can pretty much, as a photographer, I dictate the terms by which I take photographs. This is what I've always tried to infer to young kids today, that we are very powerful people in our own right. I've now photographed the royal family, I've photographed Henry Ford, I've photographed Paul McCartney. I don't mention these names just to drop names, but they are of historical significance to me because they're of such personage that how could a kind of what do you call a mechanic of sorts, a plumber, a carpenter. That is my industry, being a photographer. The control we have over the vision that other people see is paramount to me. It's very important for me now to project always the best that can be done. And to do that, you have to be this omnipotent person. It's like being a photographer puts a cloak of power over you, and you dictate the terms by which this person is going to be seen by the entire world.
Do you find that people respond to your direction, I would say your commands, to your direction easily, or do some of them grate against it?
I had an incident with Prince Philip in which he was really annoyed that I should tell him to stand up straight. I won't go into the situation, but I discovered that again, this cloak of omnipotence was sort of thrown over my shoulder. And when there was this confrontation that was going on, I took it upon myself to take this bull by the horns and basically it was a piece of tape that I had placed on the floor, and he was to step on it with his right foot. I had placed it in such a way that when I was backed up against the wall, I didn't have much more room to actually frame the whole family, as photographing the whole family. And lo and behold, when I looked through the camera, the Hasselblad looking under there, he was leaning over to his right. He was literally just leaning over to his right, and I was cutting off his shoulders. So when I looked at him straight in the eye, and Her Majesty was there, and Prince Andrew and Sarah and not Sarah, the immediate family. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Sir, would you mind standing up straight?" All the air in the kingdom was being sucked out of that room in that one moment, with Her Majesty and Andrew and Charles and Anne and Edward just this was confrontational. And when Prince Philip looked me right back in the eye and said, "I'm standing straight," and he leaned even more so. Like, oh Lord, now I have to justify why I'm here. So I walked straight up to him, and I took this piece of tape and I moved it over 6 inches that way. Mm-hmm. I said, "Now step on the tape, sir, and you can lean all you like." They still tell the story. I'm told by closest, very close to the family, they still tell the story. And it's not that you can't be offish. I mean, I've heard stories about other photographers who in this guise you have to be clever about it. And I don't mean you have to be smart, but you have to be clever about how to diffuse a possible situation that could tear the whole thing apart. But it's like being like the airline pilot in a plane. You can't have passengers telling you how to fly the plane. You're in charge. And it's such an important part of the makeup of an artist, that as long as they can see, whether they be Prince Philip or the little girl crying, as long as they can see that you have the control over this and nothing will happen that's untoward you, you've got them. I mean, for me, of all the things that have happened to me, besides working with various interesting members of the family, I remember this one day when Henry Ford had booked me to photograph him and his family. And I turned up at his house, and on his calendar, on his day-to-day book, was my name written out, Gene Nocon, 3 p.m. That was amazing. I mean, that in his handwriting was, to me, like, I've arrived.
He had selected you, and that was apparent to you.
He had selected me, which was great, for one thing, but that I was actually such an important part of his day-to-day activity that he penned me in. It wasn't like the plumber's coming, and I wouldn't be there at all.
It wasn't like photographer 3 p.m. It was Gene Nocon.
It was Gene Nocon. And it said, "This man will be here." And they had to dress for me. They even flew in a makeup artist for all the women from Paris to make up the women. And I know Mrs. Ford very well, and that's how I know Henry. Mrs. Ford and I are still very good friends. In fact, she called me before she left for London last weekend. I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Oh, Henry left me the house." Cool. She's got this big house. I'll show you the house.